Forecast.News is your gateway to all things blockchain. We do the deep dive and the due diligence on the blockchain projects and platforms that matter, because we aim to be the most reliable source of intellectual discourse and insight that inform, educate, and bridge the gap between the blockchain industry and the mainstream. Welcome to this special edition of Word on the Block. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Forecast.News, Angie Lau, and today we're going to talk about the social impact space and how blockchain can be a key tool in eradicating modern slavery. Now, modern slavery is something that just sickens any stomach. Think of this: indentured servitude, forced labor, and really trapped by your employer with really no cause or any dream to escape. That really is the fate of 40 million victims worldwide. This is the 21st century. How do we fix this problem? It's something that Mark Blick, head of government solutions, blockchain technology here at Diginex, is very familiar with. And Mark, you've been working on blockchain solutions to help eradicate modern slavery. Now, when we think about blockchain, modern slavery is not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. In fact, a lot of people are still unsure as to the application of blockchain. How did we get here? How can blockchain help this worldwide issue that exists still?
Yeah, and that's a great question. As a company, we've always had a purpose and a mandate to identify fundamentally good projects which help validate the technology, and also preferably projects that would have a potential for impact at scale. We were very fortunate in early last year to meet with an NGO based here in Hong Kong called the Mekong Club. They're a single issue NGO focused on combating modern slavery in private sector supply chains. And I remember our first meeting with them. They were very humble, Matt Friedman and Phoebe Ewan. They turned up saying, we know nothing about blockchain. And then they produced a white paper they'd written on how blockchain could help combat modern slavery. So that was great for us as a technology company. We're always cognizant of not building something and then just telling people to use it, but have people like the Mekong Club who have spent decades combating this issue and really understand it from a policy perspective and issue perspective in identifying, if you guys want to help, please do this and please do this. And that was our starting point.
But why does blockchain allow this transparency to exist and to eradicate modern slavery? What is it that is the key issue that keeps people really enslaved that blockchain can solve?
So I think that there's a wide range of issues which cause this issue, but the two specifically which blockchain I think can help with, and this was in the Mekong Club white paper, was around contract substitution and around the fees that are charged. So if we look at the journey of a migrant worker who may choose to move from Bangladesh to, let's say, Malaysia to go and work in a toy factory, and that's a willing journey they undertake. They agree a set of terms when they're in the country of origin in Bangladesh and say, I'm going to work for 40 hours a week for X dollars. But during the course of their journey, they work with employment agents in both country of origin and also country of destination. Often contracts are substituted or changed. And they arrive in a factory finding they're working for double the time and half the pay. And often they've had to take out high fees in order to secure those roles. And on those fees, they're paying extortionate interest rates. So they find themselves working for a lot less money than they thought, a lot longer hours. All of their salary goes directly into repaying these loans they've taken out. Their passports have often been taken away. They're in a foreign country, maybe not speaking the local language, probably not speaking the local language.
They probably have no idea how to access help, police, lawyers. They have no idea the system.
Yeah. So we were focused on that issue of contract substitution. And the single question which I like to boil blockchain technology down to, which is, I need to know what I'm looking at is what you're looking at. And if you look at the various ecosystem stakeholders that are in this universe, you have the employment agents, you have the migrant worker, the factory, the brand, you have social audit companies, Ministry of Labor, you have intergovernmental organizations, all trying to look at contractual terms to understand, well, what was agreed and at what point? How can we capture a set of employment terms which were agreed at a specific point, and that be captured immutably and forever and then transmitted and surfaced throughout that ecosystem? I think for us, the real value add is, how do I move away from a paper-based process? The fact that I use an orchestrated workflow amongst a bunch of market participants that happens to use DLT, well, that gives me better cryptography, and it gives me some interesting workflow options and some deterministic computation. But it's really just a design choice around storage. Where we're coming at it from is, where is there an inefficient process, often based on paper, that has a high error rate, that's potentially open to fraud? And we start with, how do we create digital information within that? Preferably native. If not, we digitize existing paper information into digital. And then we understand, okay, we have this digital data. How do we store it? And maybe blockchain isn't the best situation if it's two people and they're just transacting amongst themselves. But if it is this complex ecosystem where you have multiple stakeholders who are looking to create, share, and read information, who may or may not trust each other, then we believe that blockchain is a great answer to be able to store that information.
Because right now, you take a look at the situation that a lot of migrant workers or people who are really economic refugees, if you think about it, seeking wealth or work in another land, right? But the contract itself, that seems so unfair. Why should that exist in the first place? And why should anybody think that that would be a valid contract? I mean, if we talked about the contract in and of itself, what is it about the system that allows these very disadvantageous contracts to even exist and be held by law? I don't get that part.
Yeah, and it's the vulnerability of the migrant worker. They move through these various checkpoints from employment agent and country of origin where everything looks great. I'm going to move to a new country. Here's the contract. It looks wonderful. I'm going to move, and when I arrive in my next country, then a clause has been edited, or a new contract is given. Or we've worked in situations where we've surveyed workers and 100% haven't had their contract with them. It's been taken away. So how can we give access? This was the point at which we started, and I think there are lots of additional benefits that we can discuss to this solution. But we started with this core question of, how do I ensure that a migrant worker always has access to the contractual terms that they originally agreed, and they can then show those terms to anybody who asks? And that may be a social audit company or an NGO, but they can demonstrate, I agreed this at this time, and nobody can dispute that. That was the core of the project.
So nobody can dispute it, but of course it means that the migrant worker has to tap into the system that you've created with Mekong Club. Tell me how this is actually unfurling in real life. How is this blockchain application being used right now?
There are two ways. The original way was we have created a standalone app. It's as simple as possible. We had a former Google project engineer here who said, if it's more than 2 clicks, no one will use it. So we went from the original prototype, which was, 8 clicks, and down to press a button, take a photograph, agree, and it's done. So I think that in and of itself is a great solution. Where we've tended to after that is often, with our partner actually in Thailand, it's a great example. They have a platform that's already in the field, the migrant workers are already familiar with. And for us, it's about, how do we integrate the system that we've built into a platform that migrant workers are already comfortable with and already use. And so for them, it's not a new download on a new phone. It's not trying to explain, well, this is what it does. It's new functionality and something which they're already familiar with. And that's a preferred way for us to try and drive scale.
And on the consumer, on the retail end of things, this is something that actually consumers are increasingly demanding of retailers, to make sure that they are socially responsible at every stage of supply chain and manufacturing. Which are the retailers that are using this blockchain technology to eradicate modern slavery and to ensure that fair contracts exist between the manufacturer and its employees? Which retailers are we talking about right now?
Members of the Mekong Club's Business Association. Where we've started is right on the ground. So you tend to have the brands that sit on top, who may and actually generally do not own the factories that they source from.
Right, of course.
We've gone directly to work with the factories in collaboration with the brands. And as we move vertically, we'll move closer towards where migrant workers came from. And we'll also move closer to the brands and ultimately move closer towards consumer. I think it's our goal as we work towards transparency. And there's a wonderful quote by William Wilberforce. You may claim that, you may choose to turn the other way, but you can never claim that you did not know. And for us to drive that as, if you have these complex supply chains with multiple factories, how can we raise the level of transparency where it's difficult to claim that you did not know, at least where folks were being transparent as to who was working in those factories?
How do I know as a consumer that this is being applied? This is something that actually I would really care about.
Yeah.
So how transparent is it for me to see that this is being used right now in any product that I consume?
Not yet. Our goal will be by next year that it's consumer ready. We started in the middle with the migrant worker in the factory, and the quicker we can move out to the consumer, the better.
Give me some analytics in right now from the Mekong Club.
Yeah.
How effective has this been already?
If you look at the universe of modern slavery, we have 40.3 million people affected by modern slavery globally. That's 9 million people entering modern slavery every single year. 25,000 a day, 1,000 an hour, one new person entering slavery every 4 seconds in a $150 billion a year industry. And despite the best efforts of wonderful people doing great work, we're only helping around 0.2% of those every single year, which is not a great amount. Our partners in Thailand, and it's still our first project, and we will be scaling into others across different regions, but we have scale across 5,000 workers and 100 farms in sugarcane and shrimp farming. And the quicker we can integrate within private sector, and this was a big driver from the Mekong Club, and again, partly by luck, partly by design, was working with a partner like the Mekong Club who understood the power of the private sector, and that the way to drive scale was to engage positively with those folks who really want to do the right thing, and who understand, or from a risk mitigation point of view, the better transparency I have as to my supply chains, the better. But also from a brand and consumer point of view, the better I can demonstrate I'm doing the right thing, the better. And the best way for us to roll out that technology is with those brands. And that's where we'll be working on in the next 6 to 9 months.
One of the big criticisms of blockchain is the blockchain itself cannot guarantee the validity of the information. It can only make sure that once it's in there, it's immutable, it cannot be changed. Which means that if it is not valid or true or genuine information before it enters the blockchain, on the back end, it's still garbage. How do you make sure that this process, before it's enforced, immutable, unchangeable, is actually the genuine artifact, truth, that the migrant worker knows all their rights, they haven't signed away their life or their families? How do we make sure that this process is clean?
I think there's a couple of ways. One is, of course, through education and training, and you look at pre-departure training that you do with migrant workers to raise awareness of what technological solutions are out there. I think where this project has really got to is if we look at the current social audit process. The current social audit process is somewhere along the lines of, I'm turning up on Thursday, heads up I'm coming, I have a clipboard and 300 questions, I'm going to spend 8 hours in your factory, and I'll come again next year. Is how we can improve that process. Now, to your point, if people enter in fake information or false information, there is still a risk. But if we can improve the social audit process, and I look at it in this construct, you have factual information. That's information you believe you know to be true. It's told to you during a KYC process or an onboarding process or a screening process. So you have a factory that's told you, I employ 1,000 workers, and I pay each one of those workers $500 a month. And you're told this in a piece of paper and a stamp and so on and so forth. But what we're lacking is the transactional and behavioral information that you should be able to see that underpins that. You say you have 1,000 workers, fine. I want to see 1,000 contracts that have been verified on both sides, which reconcile to your records. I want to see salary verification slips, which again reconcile to those records. And it's not going to be perfectly reconciled, but let's say when I do turn up on my once a year audit, I have 70-80% of my data collection done, and I can focus on A, filling in the gaps, and B, capacity building around working with migrant workers to ask the questions of, well, I see here that you've entered this, is this correct? And it's more the engagement with people. There's a funny anecdote which came across the other day of a company that made all sorts of wonderful declarations around social governance and so on and so forth. They had thousands of workers in factories across Southeast Asia, so very hot. And it turned out that they only turned on the air conditioning the 2 days of the year that the auditors came through town.
Wow.
And it was a big electricity saving, of course, to turn it off every other day of the year. Now, why can't or what we should do is create a basket of 8 to 10 social governance metrics. Air conditioning may be one of them, employment contracts, dust monitoring levels, hours worked, and so on and so forth. And why can't I maybe not see that real time, but why can't I see it on a monthly basis? Why do I have to rely on an audit trail? And how do I put that on a platform which can then be sent to a broad network of stakeholders within the ecosystem so they can all see the conditions under which that factory or that company operates?
And now we're really talking here. How are we applying the technology tools of observation and correlation in a way that we could scale versus the inspector that can only come once or twice a year, probably overworked, probably
Yes.
has thousands and thousands and thousands of cases and just wants to or needs to get to the next inspection.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're really talking about here.
Yeah.
How is this idea changing really the precept of how NGOs can work with their projects on the ground? Are you starting to also educate the NGOs as to the potential of how they can use and apply technology in their thinking as they help real people?
Yeah, we are, and we're trying to, and it's a long journey. And I have been increasingly and always inspired and amazed by the passion and drive that we see from that community. And I cannot speak highly enough of the Mekong Club and what they've taught us and how they've shown technology can help on this issue. So I work with them in Hong Kong or across Asia. I work in Thailand with Verificate. We've recently started partnering with 2 NGOs in India. And it's I think that partnership between public and private that's very important, and I think is the optimal way in trying to combat these issues.
Which industries are on the roadmap to use the EMIN?
EMIN, yes.
All right, to use the EMIN app to apply to eradicating modern slavery.
So we started in aquaculture, that's shrimp farming. We'll be moving into sugarcane in Southeast Asia later this year, apparel in Bangladesh and India, and food and beverage in Bahrain. And that'll keep us occupied for a full 12 months, and I'm sure we'll grow from there. But those are the industries, you tend to be the ones which are more consumer facing. They tend to be more aware of the issue. And we believe strongly that a socially well-governed company is normally a great predictor and indicator of a well-run company. And trying to help companies who are doing the right thing demonstrate that. So a great example is the shrimp farm that we work with in Thailand. And certainly when we are learning from that visit, we've done a great job from the head of sustainability point of view, because that was the people we worked with at the Mekong Club. And I think we did a pretty good job with the migrant workers, because again, the Mekong Club and Verificate helped us understand that issue. The audience which we really learned from right at the beginning in phase 1 was the hiring manager, the factory manager. That we come in and say, here's a new tool, upload data, and the question is, what's in it for me? How does this help me? And we have the luxury of being able to choose to work with great actors who are doing good things, and to explain to them. So they supply into a large Thai fish food company. And every quarter, that company comes down and conducts an audit. And they do the right thing, but it's not particularly efficient. And it's pretty painful. And it's sitting in a room over a week and going through lots of paper. And they're understanding that we can start connecting the company and the factory and the worker on a more real-time basis. So again, that quantitative data collection can take place ahead of time. And when the Thai seafood company comes onto site, a lot of that work is already done. Ultimately, that Thai seafood company supplies into Costco. So it continues going up and up. You have this transparency.
Look, it reinforces good practices, to be sure, right? But what about all the competitors who say it's cheaper to trick people to work for half price or cheap or for free, right? How do we get those bad actors? How does this technology assist getting those bad actors called to task through either government or law enforcement or what? I mean, how does this technology help eradicate that, or can it?
I think it's by crowding them out. If I am a brand and I want to contract with people, increasingly for regulatory reasons, for legislative reasons, and for consumer just brand awareness reasons, I'm going to choose to work with those companies that can demonstrate they're doing the right thing. If there are bad actors that want to continue doing the right thing and not make declarations around how they operate and give transparency, companies will just choose not to work with them. I think a very interesting evolution we saw very recently. You've always had this pressure coming downward from brands saying, do the right thing. What we've seen recently is factories coming to the brands and saying, we used to just compete on price. We now understand that risk mitigation and brand view is important. How can we demonstrate to you that we're doing the right thing? And that makes it a value differentiator between all the other guys in the marketplace. So that's beginning to happen.
And blockchain actually makes it cheaper and more efficient for them to do so, which means it's affordable and it encourages and empowers them to observe best practices.
Yeah.
So you've started now. Where do you see this scaling? Do you see this scaling in other socially impactful ways?
There are various ways in which we want to scale. The most direct one is how do we get scaled with the core product that we have, which is enhancing transparency in labor recruitment processes. We're putting together right now a very large project which has ambitious goals. It's 5 million workers over 3 years. It's a large project that we have, or that we feel very confident with it. But then it's to go back to the point that we raised earlier on around the broader social governance metrics. And then it becomes very exciting around how can I get a greater picture of how companies operate?
Because how they operate matters a heck of a lot to the consumer.
Yeah.
Increasingly, we recognize that as individuals, that we have not only purchasing power, but that purchasing power also comes with social power.
Yeah.
So thanks for helping us understand a little bit more as to how transparency can really cast light on darkness, which is what this is all about at the end of the day. Mark Blick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.